Okay, we're ready to go.
Okay. Welcome, Dr. Muller. Okay, so this is a webinar to try to explain the mini grids competition. We are offering a challenge fund for applications. Hang on, I just need to, yeah. For those of you that are not very aware of the Modern Energy Cooking Services Programme, it's a 7-year programme funded by UK Aid. We're seeking to integrate modern energy cooking services into the planning for electricity access to give quality, reliability and sustainability. Some of you will be aware that on previous webinars, we took about an artificial separation between the cooking needs of households and the electrical needs of households. And as a program, we're trying to bring those together into an integrated planning that takes into account both. MECS hopes to leverage the investment in renewable energies, particularly electrical renewable energy, both grid and off-grid, to address the clean cooking challenge. So we're implementing a strategy focused on including those cooking needs into the investment and action on access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, modern energy for all, SDG 7. Jane, can I just check that I'm loud enough?
Yeah, you're very clear for me, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this challenge fund is intended to explicitly strengthen the utilization of mini grids for electrical energy efficient appliance cooking. We have done a number of pilots and trials on mini grids. As many of you on the webinar will know, mini grid tariffs tend to be much higher than national grid tariffs. But nevertheless, our early research and piloting shows that it can be cost effective for meals and can save in the collection of firewood and charcoal, and help with the transition to clean energy. What we have found so far is that e-cooking tends to hold a better potential as part of a profitable business case for mini grids when it is planned as a load from the start. It's often quite difficult to retrofit a sizable number of households working with energy efficient e-cooking appliances because the grid has been sized for certain loads, including maybe an anchor load for productive use. So our hypothesis for this challenge fund is that if people are given the opportunity to plan a mini grid from the start with e-cooking involved, that it will be easier to technically fit that challenge and to make it a profitable mini grid for the developer. So we hope this challenge fund can be used to integrate electric cooking loads into mini grid use. As I said, the purpose of this challenge fund is the delivery of mini grid systems inclusive of e-cooking, along with a research and data gathering plan. We are a research program, and so we wish to learn from this activity. Phase 1, we're offering the challenge fund in 2 phases, and there will be a competitive breakpoint between phase 1 and phase 2. In your initial application, you will be bidding for a 5-month formative research inception stage to show that there is a business case for the mini grid with and without cooking. There is then a breakpoint, and depending on the plan, the applicant can progress to phase 2. Phase 2 will be to actually implement that business case for e-cooking on the mini grid. This step of implementation is expected to include a learning research and data gathering that runs alongside that implementation. We are aware that the second phase funding may not be enough to build a medium to large mini grid, but what we're hoping is that by offering that phase 2 funding, it mitigates the risk for the mini grid developer, and they should be able to leverage funding from elsewhere. The project for both phases will be a time of 29 months, and the total funding is £200,000 split across the two phases as 50,000 and 150,000. As I said, progression between the phases will be competitive and dependent on the overall success of the previous phase. So in phase 1, you're developing a business plan and offering a coherent way forward. We will fund multiple projects, not just one, and if you have match funding, financial or in kind, and can demonstrate links to other funding programs, then that will be desirable and you'll score higher in your application. All payments are conditional upon receipt by Loughborough University of a satisfactory statement of grant usage and supporting evidence of financial documentations such as receipts. So question 1, outline of a business plan and model for cooking use. So we've given you a sort of framework, a list of headings from within the section titled Business Plan and Modeling Cooking Use of on mini grids explained in detail. I'll go through some of those in a moment, but the deliverable for phase 1 is a business plan in as much detail as possible and a model for your chosen grid showing load profile, etc. In your application for the funding for phase 1, you should include any details of groundwork that you've already completed and the existing knowledge that you're drawing on. So some people will have experiences of mini grids. Some of you may have even done trials. Please differentiate between the data you have already collected and the data and information you have sourced from other organizations. And you can respond to the questions in the application form either as a narrative, tabular, diagrammatically, combination of options. Text in diagram is excluded from the word count. You should also identify what data knowledge gaps need to be filled during phase 1. The reason we've given you an inception phase and time and reasonable finance to try and create the business plan is so that you can actually go out and identify any data gaps that you have. So you may not have survey of household fuels used for cooking. You might want to go out and incorporate that. You should explain in your application for phase 1 how the existing data can be incorporated into and support the new data that will be collected. So you may have looked through MECS literature and come up with a general consumption of electricity use in electric pressure cookers, but then you might want to go and actually do a quick field trial with a couple of families to show what it means in their cultural context. Yes, and if you are using the research or knowledge products from other people, including ourselves, please highlight which is your own information, the difference between which is your own information and which is information that you have pulled from elsewhere. Excuse me. In your application, you should outline the project management. That should include a Gantt chart of activities and clearly describe the relevant risks, how you plan to mitigate them, anything to do with safeguarding or whistleblowing. Describe the roles, skills, and relevant experience of the project team, and include any subcontractors. Bios of up to 250 words can be provided for up to 5 team members. You don't have to document who's going to sweep the floor and clean, but please, the primary 5 people involved or less. Details of other team members could be provided in a tabular format. There are different skills needed for data collection, consolidation, and analysis during the research bit. We recognize that. You may want to subcontract that to a company or agency that is used to survey collecting and follow-ups. Basically, the application form should demonstrate that there is a team capable of completing all the required tasks during the 5 months available. So, project finances, please include all the cost information clearly explained. Now, remember, this is the cost information for phase 1 because you haven't yet got your business plan. So it's about the phase 1 activity. Subcontractor costs should be justified. The response should clearly describe what you'll spend the funding on and how you will demonstrate value for money. If you expect to pay VAT during the delivery of the research and are unable to recover this from revenue, you must ensure that these costs of these VAT payments are included at this stage. Only eligible costs directly associated with the MECS-COSMO project will be reimbursed. Please refer to a section you'll see on the paperwork of eligible expenditure. As I said earlier, our research to date suggests that just before I move on, I'm going to say that in a moment I will explain or Jane will explain the platform that you have to make the application through. So explaining again, the reason we're making this challenge fund is that we're seeking agencies, developers, mini-grid developers, organizations that are planning new mini-grid installations, because we think that ecooking will give them greater profitability if planned from the start. Although that is our hypothesis and our premise, it is possible to apply for retrofitting an existing mini-grid if you can make a strong enough case. I talked about electric energy efficient appliances. Electric pressure cookers are at the moment the front-running candidates for the inclusion of ecooking in a mini-grid. Even at $1 a watt, an electric pressure cooker is so energy efficient that some meals are cheaper than charcoal and LPG. And there is a recent paper on that, analysing our pilot schemes. Electric pressure cookers are particularly good for African foods that require long duration cooking. They can fry, but they're not that great for quick stir fries, or not that they're not that great. They make very little energy saving for a quick stir fry. Obviously, rice cookers as well, because of their insulation. However, we will consider any energy efficient electric cooking device as long as you make a strong case for it. I'm just telling you that electric pressure cookers are the front runner. So what might you put in your details of the business plan? Please put in as much detail as possible. The graduation from phase 1 to phase 2 very much depends on you're making a strong case. I've been through some of these already, that it should provide an overview of the groundwork already completed, what data already exists, and what data you're seeking to collect and collate. Identify the knowledge gaps that you're going to fill during the phase 1, and the different skills needed for data collection, consolidation, and analysis. So the application should demonstrate all of these things. When it comes to the actual business plan, you might want to consider these elements. They're not all essential, but given our understanding of mini-grids and planning of mini-grids, these are important elements. An analysis of current household and business expenditure on cooking, depending on where your mini-grid is. If it's a market town or peri-urban situation, people may be paying a lot for their fuels. If it is a genuine sort of rural area, we've seen one on an island in Tanzania, then it's more about collecting firewood, and the alternatives are there. So the mini-grid provides some convenience rather than a true cost replacement of expenditure on polluting biomass fuels. You need a detailed financial model for the mini-grid. What tariff will you be applying, and how will that lead to recovery and the internal rate of return, etc. And a technical performance model showing the role and added value of ecooking. Earlier we talked about with and without ecooking. As many of you know, one of the challenges for mini grids is they get installed and then households only use them for light and recharging their mobile phone, and the consumption, the demand for electricity is so low that it barely justifies the mini grid. And often most discussion nowadays is about an anchor load on a productive use element, so maybe on irrigation or a grain milling machine, etc. Our initial research suggests that ecooking, which is an expenditure of existing households, which can be redirected, instead of going into the charcoal market, it's going into your mini grid, and that ecooking can create increased demand that fits the mini grid development. Please explain how the mini grid will operate within its environment. Make sure that you cover the regulatory guidelines, the tariffs. We hope that some of you might suggest tariff experiments. I think that's on the next slide. Yeah, tariff structure should be explained, but we're also aware that sometimes tariffs are governed by rules and regulations from the regulator, and cannot always be flexed. If you're developing a new mini grid, please give us the pathway to operation. So whether you've already got investors or whether you're looking for a bankable proposal for investors. As I said, please model the effect of the ecooking loads, and maybe show with and without, so that we can see whether the ecooking is making a difference to what might have happened otherwise. Demand management planning I've already talked about, and energy efficient appliances must fit the market space and be durable and repairable. So again, it's no point in planning a mini grid with a particular energy efficient appliance if, when that breaks, it can't be replaced. There should be a supply chain. There should be some way of repairing it if it does fail. Opportunities to mitigate the upfront cost for users. Energy efficient electrical appliances are potentially a one-off upfront cost for households that they are unwilling to find. I've put it as opportunities to mitigate that upfront cost because we are seeing all sorts of possibilities in results-based financing, carbon financing, or it may just be that in order to have a profitable mini grid, it's worth the mini grid developer actually subsidizing the upfront cost and doing it on a pay-as-you-go basis. Some practical things, the wiring. Sometimes the wiring at the household level, it's not strong enough to take the extra power loads of ecooking. And warranties, how will you guarantee to customers that their devices don't break within the first 2 months and then they're stuck? You could include in that business plan your sales and awareness campaign. How will you recruit? Will it be everybody on the mini grid? Will it be a portion? Is it first come, first served up until a limit? Who knows? And please make sure that there's some sort of immediate after sales provision. With electric pressure cookers, you do have to cook very slightly differently. It doesn't evaporate the water, and so in the first day or so, some cooks add too much water, and they have to learn very quickly not to add as much water as they used to. And so demonstrations, word of mouth, getting one of the early adopters, sharing with their neighbors, these are all really important points for making sure that the transition across to e-cooking on the use of on your mini grid is realistic and there. And again, I've talked about repair. Please make sure that there is some, even though you obviously going to try to acquire energy efficient appliances that are durable, please do, they will all inevitably break. And so what will you put in place in terms of a repair technician that is within reach of the community? And actually, if we just think far into the future, we are increasingly concerned about e-waste management. We all have electronic devices, and e-waste is becoming a real issue within our global culture. And so maybe even you could mention in your business plan what might happen at the end of the life of an appliance. Will you, as the mini grid developer, take it back and make sure it's recycled properly, or what? So then, having submitted a business plan as the deliverable for phase 1, that will form the basis of the application for phase 2. There might be a few extra things. In phase 2, it's how do we implement that business plan? But because we are a research organization, we would look within phase 2 to monitoring a minimum of 10% of the users. How are you going to do that? How are you going to get feedback from those users in terms of their experience, interviewing them regarding their experiences, but also, is there any appliance level device that is going to monitor the actual use of the appliance as opposed to the meter that monitors electric consumption for the household? And as we've said, you may suggest a way of mitigating the upfront costs of the appliances. And so it would be great if in the end of phase 2 or mid and end, there's a review of the suitability of that plan and whether it has worked well or not. The competition as a whole is open to all organizations, all sizes, businesses, medium-sized enterprises, academia, but you should at least identify a lead organization. Previous recipients of FCDO funding and other Loughborough University projects are welcome to apply. already having a grant from us for something else does not preclude you from applying here. However, organisations who fund grant-making schemes of their own are not eligible. The competition welcomes any application from any organisation based in any part of the world, but the project activities obviously must be in an eligible country. There used to be a target list for DFID. That list is slightly modified as FCDO, and I believe the list is in the documentation. Proposals suggesting working in more than one country will be rejected. This is very much about the business plan for a mini grid in a particular location. Excuse me. Right, I'll just start this off, but then I'm going to hand over to Jane in a moment. All the competition documents, including the application form, are available through the Delta eSourcing portal. That's a university requirement, and you'll have to register as a supplier, and the registration is free. And if you have problems, please email us. It is not totally intuitive at the start, but once you get the documents, it's easy and you will understand it. Jane, would you like to take over at this point?
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Okay, so essentially you need to register on this platform. We're very much using the platform as a postal service. So once you've registered, all of the documentation will be available there and you'll be able to download it. That will include the application form and the supporting documents for this call. So please do read everything that is there. When you've registered on the site, or in order to register on the site, you will need, there's a specific code. So that's currently on the MECS Challenge Fund webpage. So you'll be able to find that code. I will paste it into the chat. So if you're using that code, that's the one you need. It will take you to the web page. There'll actually be two calls that will be open there at the moment. So make sure that you choose the right one. As we noticed here, there's the access code. You can only make your application through the portal, but what you'll be doing is basically uploading your application through that portal and it'll get sent directly to us.
If I can just say, Jane, to everyone. So I found it quite difficult at the beginning, and it's just important to note the difference between registration. So as soon as you go to the site, you've got that blue button up in the top right-hand corner, and you need to register as a supplier, and you're hitting that register as a supplier button. And then you go through all the filling in the form to register as a supplier. Then it will take you to another page and you put in that code. We don't have a screenshot of that page in this PowerPoint presentation, but there will be a screenshot on the website, on our website, just to help you through this little bit of the process. Sorry, Jane, go for it.
No, that's fine. Thanks, Simon. Actually, I would note that, so the previous call, because Simon is registered as a supplier, then he's kind of been through the process and we've put together guidance for our supply chain call. So you can have a look at that documentation and that will guide you. Please ignore the code because that will be different and that will relate to this, and anything specific to the supply chain won't be relevant, but it will give you the process and it will be a step forward for you to kind of or work your way through. But if you do have any queries, just send an email and we'll be able to help you. So moving on, the key dates for this competition. So as you're all aware, this webinar is being recorded and it will be put on our website, hopefully at the beginning of next week, if not later today. So please direct anybody that's missed it to that recording. The competition is already open and it closes at 23:59 on the 9th of November. So that's a Wednesday evening. We're hoping to make decisions quite quickly and we'll let those successful applicants know before the end of November. At that point, we will ask you to undertake the due diligence process, and in some ways it can be more lengthy than your application process, which is why that you're given 2 weeks in order to undertake that. We have to assess that due diligence as well as your application, and assuming there's no problems, then we'll let our selected candidates know in December. It takes us a couple of weeks to go through that due diligence process. And then we will notify the unsuccessful applicants later on in December after the successful ones have been told. The aim is to have the project start in January 2023, and the kick-off meetings will start later that month. And the final report deadline for phase 1, so that's the first section of this call, is May 2023. After which point we'll review that final report and then we'll make a decision as to whether applicants can go forward into phase 2. So as I've noticed, competition documents will be available on the Delta site. The grant specification document is also available on our website. You'll be able to download from Delta all of those documents. Frequently asked questions is quite important, and it's built up from questions that have been asked at previous calls that we've run. So hopefully it'll answer all of your questions. But if you do have any queries, please just send us an email and we'll get back to you quickly with a response. Okay, so any questions from anybody, please either pop it in the chat or do feel free to ask.
What I will do, Jane, is I just stop sharing that, and then just very briefly, I went to the site and saw this was the previous guidance for registering with Delta eSource. So as I said, this is the register button up here, and that takes you to this page, which then goes to the register as supplier. You then fill in the form and complete your registration. Then once you've signed in, so you then get a sign-in page, and you log in and you go to, this is the bit that I didn't find particularly intuitive. You go to Response Manager. So it says, welcome to Delta, because you're now signed in, and view invites and responses. And then under Response Manager, you will get this question access code, and that's where you put the code in. That code is for our other challenge fund, and so the one in the chat is the code that you would put here. This document is on our website, so you can come back to it and explain. And then once you've entered that access code, you get all the documents down here at the bottom of the page, and you can click on them and see all the way through them. Okay, I hope that helps slightly. As I said, I found it, I didn't find it completely intuitive, but we've tried to make it as helpful as possible.
Thanks, Simon.
Okay, any questions? Don't see any in the chat.
No. Maybe we just bombarded people with information.
Well, we don't have a big live audience, so yeah. Oh, Tasmiat has put his hand up. Please unmute yourself and ask your question. Assuming he can unmute himself, Jane, you haven't put any blocks on it. He's got a different symbol next to his name, which suggests that he Might be
Yeah.
locked out.
Should be fine.
Hello, hi. Yeah, I can talk now. Sorry about that. Yeah, I couldn't unmute before. Thank you for the talk. Just wanted to ask a little bit about the support for the actual mini grid supplier. You did mention that this fund may not be able to, cost up a full mini grid installation, but is that the same as saying we can't use any cost towards the actual mini grid installation?
No. We're just aware that it's a 50,000, 150,000 split, and we're just aware that 150,000 is possibly not enough to fund a whole mini grid development. But that 150,000 can definitely be used for mini grid development. That's the whole point of it. And
Okay, so it can contribute towards some of the, it can contribute to some of that capital cost.
Yeah,
which
yeah.
can help us leverage some funds by the company, right?
Exactly. That's the whole point of it. Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, that was my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there has been a question in the chat about whether the presentation, the recording will be sent, or the presentation actually will be sent via email. So I'm happy to do that, Simon.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the recording be a bit large, but you can send a link to the recording, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and but it will also go onto the website.
Yeah. Okay, just giving people a pause in case there's another question. Yeah, go on then, Tasmia.
Sorry, just one more. In terms of the mini grid, does it have to be a already mini grid in the planning, or is it something that we've identified actually the location is ideal for a mini grid in the ecooking context, and it can be a new project? Or should we be really identifying partners who've already said, like, yeah, I'm going to plan to put a mini grid here, and then we would partner with them and say, well, have you thought about ecooking?
Any is the short answer. Yeah, we were aware that if there was this ideal location and you just wanted to plan a mini grid from scratch, that may be quite a challenge to do in 5 months, to get all the information together and then raise the matching investment to actually be able to get on with things. But it's certainly not precluded. If you can do that, do. So we were trying to set it up to be flexible for either completely new virgin plans or modifying existing plans because you've suddenly got an extra 150,000, or indeed, as I said, we believe that new planning will incorporate ecooking more easily than trying to retrofit to an existing mini grid. But if somebody believes that they can do retrofit, that's fine, as long as you make a strong case.
And is there a minimum? I know for the other call there was a minimum, I think, 2,000 users or something like that for the.
No, there's no minimum. No minimum number of people on the mini grid or number of users of ecooking. The whole point is about showing us that there is a viable business plan.
And in terms of capacity size as well for the grid, is there a minimum?
No.
Okay. All right, that's clear. Thank you so much.
Okay. Prince, you had a question. You had your hand up.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Simon, for the opportunity. So I'm Prince from Ghana, and I'm coming to ask, with the source of energy supply for the mini grid, is it going to be strictly solar, or a developer can explore other renewable energy sources?
Oh, interesting, because you turned your sentence just at the end. Other renewable energy sources? Yes, definitely. But I thought where you were going with the question was a mixture of solar and with a diesel backup. So solar and diesel backup is more difficult, because we don't want to encourage the diesel. And so if your business plan shows that you have to have the diesel in order to incorporate the e-cooking, that doesn't really fit what we're looking for. But yeah, it can be solar or hydro or wind or any other renewables. That's all fine.
All right, great, because we are coming from the background of ethanol. So we are already thinking about ethanol and other biofuels combination. So that's why we ask here.
Yeah, that's fine. Biofuels, great. Edwin, you had your hand up. You're muted at the moment. I can't hear you, Edwin, if you're speaking. He is, Jane, he's saying, could we unmute him? And if I click on his 3 dots, it does say disable mic. So you may have done something to disable his microphone. That's a change. Right, I'm going to do allow mic.
Yeah.
Edwin, you should now be able to press the unmute button. He's obviously struggling.
Edwin, can you type it into the chat?
Yeah, he's still muted, unfortunately.
That's not me.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're not sure what to do, Edwin. Sorry about that. Why don't we give you a moment? Why don't you leave the meeting and then come back in, see if that changes things. Sorry, there's nothing that we can see that we can do here. Okay, Edwin's going to step out and step in again. Anybody else got any other questions just while we're waiting for Edwin to come back in? No. Okay, well, we'll just wait for Edwin. Right, Edwin's back in. And right, now it looks to me, Jane, that you disabled his mic. Yeah, no, and now he's muted. Now he's unmuted. Yay. Hello, Edwin.
Thank you, Simon and Jane. I hope you can hear me clearly.
We can indeed.
Great. My name is Edwin Kwestika. I work with Enagro in Uganda. I manage operations here, and Enagro is a productive use of assets supplier. So we essentially partner with almost all the mini grids in Uganda to provide productive use assets. One thing I picked from the presentation is that ideally mini grids should be designed to cater for e-cooking from a point of view of having the right level of load. Now, we already have arrangements and kind of partnerships and understanding with existing mini grids. I'm not sure if in the application we need to, it's not clear the level of load that these specific mini grids have in order for them to facilitate e-cooking in Uganda, which is what we really want to drive. So what happens if, let's say, we partner with Manjulis or Winch in a certain area and they don't have sufficient load? Would they be able to receive some funding or capital as part of the application? I'm just wondering how that works because I imagine the application will be made by maybe by Enagro, and then we'll partner with a mini grid partner, but we may not have all the details of their load offhand.
So, I mean, this is a good example of why we created it with a phase 1 inception and a phase 2. You could make an application for phase 1 either as Enagro or as the mini grid developer, and say that we are going to use that 5 months to plan how ecooking can be built into this mini grid. During that 5 months, you can get the load profile from the mini grid developer. You can work with them to run that through various scenarios and modeling. And then your deliverable at the end of phase 1 is to say, look, actually, ecooking will support this mini grid. And then if that exercise has resulted in the idea, well, look, the mini grid is 80% existing and already does things, but it's not quite strong enough to do ecooking. It would need a few extra solar panels, or it would need an extra battery to make ecooking viable. Then that's what you could then use your 150,000 phase 2 money on. Is that clear, Edwin?
Okay, thanks, Simon. That's clear. That's clear. That makes sense. Happy with that.
Okay, cool. Stuart, you got a question?
G'day, Stuart from Village Infrastructure Angels here. Just a comment on that last application on mini grids. Cooking could easily overload mini grids because they weren't designed for 1,000 watts per household. One way that we got around these sorts of things in Nepal was adding 1,000 volt transformers to mini grids, and then you can actually send 4 times as much current through the same conductors without having to upgrade to a medium voltage line. 1 kV distribution is used in Nepal and Finland, but hardly anywhere else. So if anyone hits that sort of problem where you're getting excessive voltage drops because of too much current, there are solutions that can help with that without having to build out new medium voltage lines.
Thank you, Stuart. Yeah, so that's just technical advice. And I believe that the Indonesians who ran out their national grid and put in transformers that were not strong enough for cooking are actually in their plan thinking of doing that similar thing, Stuart, and having a separate transformer that then gives a set of lines to households. That's not a mini grid application, that's on their main national grid, but your advice is welcome. You still got your hand up? Do you want to say any more? No, your hand has gone. That's great. Okay, last call for any comments or questions. Oh, and just to be explicit, oh, sorry, some PowerGen has just put their hands up, but just to be explicit, Stuart's solution is within scope of the phase 2 funding. You could spend your money on that. Ire Olua, please unmute and speak.
Hi everyone. Thanks for the presentation. My name is Ire Olua. I work with PowerGen, a leading African mini grid developer. I'm not sure if I heard you correctly. I think you mentioned about some information about a diesel hybrid or something like that. You said that would not be acceptable, right?
Well, okay, so yeah, I'm aware of our cooperations with PowerGen at various points. So I believe that in some of the trials that the diesel has had to come on for longer in order to accommodate the ecooking, and that does feel that it's against the spirit of what we're trying to do, spending fossil fuel and actually quite a lot of expense to cover the ecooking. So I'm not saying that we will preclude hybrid mini grids, but I am saying that if you're showing what the performance of the mini grid without ecooking is or should be, and the performance of the mini grid with ecooking, the performance with ecooking should not be reliant on the diesel element of the hybrid. Is that clear?
Yeah, I do get you. All
Okay,
right.
thank you. All right, last call. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much, everybody who attended, and yeah, we look forward to some great applications and spending our money. Thank you. Cheers. Bye bye.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.